Hurricane Irma, massive damage across Caribbean. Hurricane Irma, what we know so far. Hello and welcome to Thursday's coverage of Hurricane Irma. Here's a roundup of the latest news. The eye of Hurricane Irma, still a Category 5 storm with sustained winds of 180 miles per hour, 290 kilometers per hour, moved westward off the northern coast of Hispaniola on Thursday morning, its winds raking the Dominican Republic and Haiti. The storm's projected path Thursday brings it almost directly over the British possessions of Turks and Caicos, followed by a course near the southern Bahamas. At least 10 people have been reported dead in the wake of the storm, an infant on Barbuda, one person in Anguilla and 8 in the French territory of Saint Martin. Thousands more remain in shelters, their homes damaged or destroyed. In Puerto Rico, almost 1 million people are without power and 50,000 without water, according to the U.S. territory's Department of Emergency Relief. Florida Governor Rick Scott has ordered mandatory evacuations for coastal stretches of South Florida, including the vulnerable Florida Keys. Fuel shortages have begun at gas stations around the state, which only has 2 major north-south highways, and authorities have opened shelters in inland areas. The storm is expected to make landfall in Florida early Saturday, though it remains unclear where exactly the hurricane will hit the mainland. On Barbuda, Prime Minister Gaston Brown said Irma had made 90% of the tiny island's structures literally rubble and that half the population was homeless. On French-administered Saint Martin, local councilman Daniel Gibbs told a local radio station 95% of the island is destroyed. French authorities have sent naval ships with supplies to the island. In Haiti and the Dominican Republic, authorities closed all schools. Haitian President Jovenel Moïse urged people in rural areas to head to shelters and out of the mountains. The hurricane is not a game, he said in a television address. On the Bahamas, Prime Minister Hubert Minnis ordered people to leave 6 southern islands, the largest evacuation in the country's history. Already one of the most powerful Atlantic hurricanes on record, Irma held sustained winds of 185 miles per hour for over 24 hours before it slowed to its current speed, making it the most enduring hurricane since the 1960s when satellite monitoring began. President Donald Trump has declared states of emergency in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Florida. Do not ignore evacuation orders, Scott told Floridians on Wednesday. We can rebuild your home but we cannot rebuild your life. In South Florida, gas stations have run out of fuel, stores of water, and hardware stores of plywood. Authorities are scrambling to dole out sandbags and other supplies to shore up homes, while people in coastal stretches are fleeing inland or north. Governor Rick Scott is due to give a press conference within minutes. Florida Governor Rick Scott has delivered a press conference to update residents about what the state is doing and what Floridians can do to protect themselves. Miami-Dade County, the most populated in the state, should expect deadly storm surge and life-threatening winds, Scott says. We can expect this along the entire East Coast, he continues, with landfall in the Florida Keys as early as Friday night. Look at the size of this storm. It is huge, Scott says. It is wider than our entire state and could cause major and life-threatening impacts on both coasts, coast to coast. Floridians on the West Coast cannot be complacent. The West Coast will still have hurricane conditions, and these storms can move and change. Remember, Hurricane Andrew was one of the worst storms in the history of Florida. This is much worse and more devastating in its current path. He has ordered mandatory evacuations for 2 zones in the county, and urged residents to check their zone with Florida's emergency management authorities. There are also evacuation zones in Collier County and Broward County. You do not need to evacuate out of the state or hundreds of miles away to stay safe. Find shelters in your county, Scott says. More than 31,000 people have already evacuated from the Keys. If you're in an evacuation area, do not wait to get out, Scott says. We can't save you after the storm starts. The governor tells families they should be aggressive in steps to protect their families. This is not a storm you can sit and wait through. Despite traffic, he says that roads remain without major problems, and that state authorities are working hard to get fuel back to gas stations and to the public. I've been very clear to the retailers and the oil companies that we have to get the fuel out so that everybody has the fuel to evacuate, he says. If you're concerned you do not have the fuel or supplies to evacuate, call 1-800 955-5504, a dedicated transport hotline. Scott says that Expedia is helping provide hotel services for evacuees and Comcast internet services around the state. He says he has requested tarps, water, baby food, supply trucks, personnel and equipment from the federal government, mobilized the federal guard, and received assurances that anybody that responded to Texas has been demobilized to come to Florida if we need them. He makes a plea for volunteers to help with sandbags, shelters, and other state coordination efforts, saying Florida needs thousands more to help. Fuel is a particular priority, he says, not just for evacuations but to get the state's services, hospitals, shelters, etc., back into working condition. We are going to have downed power lines, we are going to have debris, we are going to have all those typical things, he says, recalling the slow and painful recovery from Hurricane Andrew. We've got to survive this storm, and then we've got to get back. Scott fields a question about Lake Okeechobee and the threat of flooding. This storm is moving fast, so we will not get the same rain that Texas got, the governor says. The biggest risk with the dike at Okeechobee is rain. He stresses, again, that no one should doubt the danger of this storm. Every Florida family must be prepared to evacuate regardless of the coast you live on. The South Florida counties currently in Irma's projected course have each provided services for shelters, evacuation, and supply information. Florida's State Emergency Services, with a Know Your Zone tool to see whether specific addresses are in a mandatory or voluntary evacuation area. Miami-Dade County, the most populous in the state and with mandatory evacuation zones along the coast. Broward County, where there are already several voluntary evacuation zones and operating shelters. Palm Beach County, where demand for fuel has outpaced supplies of it but authorities have created a number of shelters for residents. Collier County, with operating shelters and a local hotline, 239-252-8444. Airports in the Bahamas are closing as Hurricane Irma nears the islands, the AP reports, while evacuations continue from southern islands closest to the storm's projected path. The government says the international airport in Nassau will close late Thursday, and it urges people who plan to leave the island chain east of Florida to check with airlines for space. Grand Bahamas Airport and a less populated island throughout the chain will close by noon Friday. The U.S. National Hurricane Center predicted Irma would remain at Category 4 or 5 for the next day or two as it passes just to the north of the Dominican Republic and Haiti on Thursday, nears the Turks and Caicos and parts of the Bahamas by Thursday night, and skirts Cuba on Friday night into Saturday. Since you're here, we have a small favor to ask. More people are reading The Guardian than ever, but advertising revenues across the media are falling fast. And unlike many news organizations, we haven't put up a paywall. We want to keep our journalism as open as we can. So you can see why we need to ask for your help. The Guardian's independent, investigative journalism takes a lot of time, money and hard work to produce. But we do it because we believe our perspective matters. Because it might well be your perspective, too. If everyone who reads our reporting, who likes it, helps to support it, our future would be much more secure. You can give to The Guardian by becoming a monthly supporter or by making a one-off contribution. Guardian HQ. The son of British billionaire Richard Branson, Sam, has posted several videos and photographs of the British Virgin Islands on his Instagram page. The images show buildings with their roofs torn from their walls, rebar and debris everywhere, and boats tossed into heaps. In a text post, Branson said there remains no power in Virgin Gorda, that some bays are flooded, 80% of Cane Garden Bay destroyed on the island of Tortola, and that winds and debris remain dangerous. Shipping containers and boats piled up like toys, city blocks leveled, and buildings stripped of whole faces are just a few of the images published online by the Dutch Ministry of Defense from a helicopter flyby. The extent of damage, injuries, and possible deaths remains unknown. From Dutch Saint Martin, at least 8 people were killed on the French side of the territory. Source News, TheGuardian.com. If you like video, please subscribe to my channel.